What's up, everybody? We're here to talk about Unicorn Overlord, and for the record, I absolutely love this game. I'm still making my way through it. It's been a bit difficult with the concussion that I have to play all the time, so I'm making slow progress, and as I kind of learn more about the game, I'm going to make a few more videos, and this was just happened to be the first topic that kind of sprung to mind that I wanted to talk about. And a lot of you have probably already heard about this, that the game's localization is polarizing some people. Some people think that, you know, it's overdone, it's a little bit flowery, it's overridden, whatever you want to call it. And other people are saying, hey, it's fine. Like, everything makes sense. It's all well translated, and you know, now translation and localization, those are two different things. So we'll get into that. But you know, some people say if they made it more interesting, then that's cool. But who's to say what's more interesting to one person and then to another? So I personally, at first, didn't really have a strong opinion about this, but the more I play the game, the stronger my opinion becomes. So I will now weigh in on this and give you my own personal opinion. Now, of course, like I said, I really like this game. This is one of the best games I've played in a long time, and so I don't want to take away from the game, but I am slowly going towards this localization is a bit overdone camp, and let's talk about why. By the way, there's some opinions online where people fire back and be like, oh, you think the game, you know, it's too complicated, you don't understand it. I think that's totally BS. I mean, I don't think anyone has any trouble understanding what the game is saying at all, unless, of course, English is your second language, then it doesn't really matter too much about the localization. Of course, they are using a lot of, you know, older words or older English words or whatever, so those might be new to you, but I don't think that it takes away from the understanding of the game to such a degree. I think that's kind of a weird argument. I think it's more just that it, you know, my personal opinion, it gets on my nerves a little bit when it's so you know, overdone to a specific degree, which again we're going to talk about. But first, let's talk about localization and what that means, and we'll go to you know, a reputable website in order to kind of determine the definition of localization. So let's see here. All right. Okay. Wikipedia: video game localization is the process of preparing a video game for a market outside of where it was originally published. The game's name, art assets, packaging, manuals, and cultural and legal differences are typically affected or altered or something. All right, so we know that it's different from just a straight translation. Like, those localization, translation, those are two different things because they're accounting for the culture of the people that are actually consuming the product. Like, if you've ever watched an anime and there's a joke that a character is making that's based on a cultural thing in Japan, it makes zero sense in English. And so oftentimes when you have the subs on, they have like the little asterisk, and then it's showing you kind of the context for the joke, because again, it would make literally no sense if they just were to put the translation on the screen. So they have to explain it, right? So let's take a look at something that I saw on Twitter. All right, so back when Unicorn Overlord was out on demo, we got a post here from Zakogdo, who was a person that played the demo and did a bunch of translations themselves, playing both versions of it. And so we got a ton of information from this, and they did a lot of work to show us the numerous examples of how the translations were maybe not one for one, which is, again, that's reasonable, but maybe went a little bit beyond just clarifying the text. At first I was like, oh, here's somebody complaining about the game. Great, you know, what do we need this for? But started reading it, and this person really did their homework, and there's quite a bit going on here. So this was mildly concerning to me. I hadn't crossed over camps yet, but basically on this thread, he goes through how different these translations are between the English and the Japanese here. So there's examples that are all, you know, laid out here where, you know, on one side it's just let her go, and then on the other side it's what business could you have with Scarlet, unhand her this instant. Now I don't really have a problem with that. You know, they've just flowered it up a little bit. There's a little bit more you know, flavor there. Not a huge deal for me. Now there's other things that we can look at here where it is maybe a little bit more than just a translation that's been buffed up a little bit. So for example, we have this one here where, you know, like little boy Elaine is saying, Joseph, I will be fine. You should lend your strength to my mother. And then he says, why are you standing there, Joseph? Aren't you going to help her? Which makes him seem a little bit more selfish, which is, you know, child's quality, I must say, as a teacher. It's kind of how it is, right? But when you actually hear this voice acted, it's not like he doesn't come off as a selfish or spoiled kid. I don't think that, you know, necessarily affected it, but it is an example of where like the character's actual personality is different in these two phrases. Like there's a total difference there. Like if we look at the bottom of the screen here, your futile resistance was actually an attempt to buy time for the prince to escape. Very straightforward. And then on the right, it would seem I underestimated her penchant for deception. Now, the queen isn't like someone that likes to deceive people regularly. Like she had a pretty, you know, good ploy to get her son to escape with Joseph so that he could survive and eventually start the Liberation Army. Like you know, it was a deception, but she doesn't have a penchant for deception. That's an example of where they just kind of like made it a little bit too over flowery or you know, too wordy. That's something that I would kind of take exception to. But again, it's not a deal breaker yet. I'll give you the example that really made me kind of like scratch my head a little bit. And I don't have like the Japanese versus the English for it, but just personally, just playing the game without knowing what the Japanese was, it was annoying to me. But there are some other things, like specifically there's this guy who's attacking the witches' village in the swamp, and he's a bit eccentric in English, I would say. Like for example, well, actually, you know what, I did like this. Like he says, so Galerius is, you know, the evil emperor who's taken over the world, and he says Galerius's foot. That's actually pretty funny. You know, I enjoy that edit from what did you say? Why would the rebel army come to a place like this? But then there's these things where, you know, on the left it says there's one last thing to try, and Beaumont, oh geez, I can't talk, says, I refuse to play their farmstead foul. There's one less haven that may offer us protection. And then after that, he says, but it's far, so very far. Do you have the pluck to make this trek with me? So no one talks like that. Nobody in the history of ever has spoken in a way like that. It's totally manufactured. It's a pun. Like it's not even like it's meant to be funny. Although this character specifically, I actually do think is supposed to be a bit comic relief. But still, like that for me, it's too much. I don't like it. Don't like it. One other interesting response I found to this post is from Loek van Kooten, who is a professional translator with 27 years of experience, according to them on Twitter, which I believe it. Okay. Anyway, so typically this person says that they have little patience for amateur subtitle creators who act overconfident and argue that phrases like everything according to this, are superior to everything according to plan. However, I must admit you've brought up some compelling arguments. So they debate this a little bit, but what I think is really important is that they say finding the right balance between staying true to the original Japanese and ensuring the English translations doesn't sound awkward or overly literal is a delicate task. Opinions on this will always vary. Nevertheless, I agree in this instance that the translation took too many liberties. A good translation should feel like it was originally written in English, yet faithfully communicate the same message as the Japanese text. Except for rare cases, inventing content is not justifiable. So that is a really good summary, a really even take, and it's from somebody that translates stuff himself. So pretty interesting to see that. Okay, so that brings us to the Province of Famine quest. Now, this is pretty early on in the game. There's no major spoilers here. It's just a side quest that you do to recruit some characters and open up a pretty gigantic area. It's a cool quest. Highly recommended, obviously. Actually, I think you have to do this one. I think it's pretty much on the way to, that first objective that you get in the story. But either way, we are introduced to Gaston, who is in charge of this area. Now, Gaston has a obsession with food puns and talking about rations and pantries and stuff. And At first I thought like, oh, Gaston, is that like gastronomy? Like maybe it has to do with food. But then I looked up the, the origin of the name, and it actually has to do with like the German name for guest, and not, it's not even that. But either way, he is obsessed, this guy. So he's taxing the country that he's the area that he's in heavily. He's taking a lot of their harvests and he's stockpiling all of it. And so he says he hears that the Liberation Army is coming, that the populace is a little bit upset about the taxations, etc. And then he gets really mad. So he says, under no circumstances are you to slack on any collections. Do you hear me? And so if he finds, anybody that's, like going to defy him, he's going to kill them. He seems like a really cruel guy from the start of this quest. And as the quest goes on, he's kind of revealed to actually have this tragic backstory where he starved as a kid, and so he doesn't want anyone to ever have to deal with famine, and so the solution to that is to stockpile. So it's kind of a cool thing. It's like, okay, here's this bad guy, but he's got kind of interesting motivation, except it totally the dialogue is completely like contradictory to that sentiment a lot of the time, because he threatens to kill his subordinate. He is a glutton, like let's see here for a sec. So here he says, before all that, I'll need a hearty meal to steel my resolve for the battle ahead. And his aide says, I don't need to question, but did you not just dine on an extravagant plateful only an hour past? So this is all to play into his like food obsession. And maybe it's because he starved as a kid that he eats as much as he can now, but that is like a stark contrast to what he is doing to this province in order, in his eyes, to save them from future famine by keeping them on a very regimented, rationed approach. Because at one point you liberate a village and they say like, Lord Gaston never missed a single ration delivery. So he was giving food to the people. He was just taking it all so he could control, the supply of it. So it's just this weird contrast between, is he a bad guy and is he actually have good intentions? But I just feel like it was really polarizing writing, and at certain points super over the top. So here we have, I'll teach those rats what becomes of those who infest my kitchen. So more food puns. The rats are the Liberation Army and his territory is his kitchen. Ha 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 ha. I get it. So you get to the end of the quest and you have to fight Gaston. And he says, the rebels are led by a simple child. Know this, boy. Lay hands on my rations at your own peril. Again, nobody talks like this. It doesn't matter what his motivations are. Like, you're literally in a life or death struggle. Your entire province has been attacked by this army. They're at your headquarters. You're meeting them at the field, whatever you want to call it. And you're just like, hey, stay away from the rations. And then the prince is kind of like, what? What are you talking about? No, I'm here to fight you, man. I'm here to fight you and your evil ways. So another example, you beat him after there's some story. What a horrible way to go. My precious stores all left to rot. No, they're not. I mean, I know it. He's talking about himself. He's gonna die. Didn't say that. Like, again, nobody talks this way. It's so frustrating to me. This was the quest. Like, there's a lot of examples of this in this game. There's tons of examples of where people are just saying these really witty wordplay punny things, and they stay on that whatever character it is, they stay on that theme. It's just a bit much. This was the straw that broke the camel's back for me personally, but it was really frustrating. And I just felt like, man, had this been handled properly, I think this would have been a really interesting reveal, because you have this guy who is seemingly just a bad guy, and little by little through the quest during the battle, it's revealed that he's actually has this noble intention of protecting the people. He's going about it in the wrong way, but instead it's just laughable because his dialogue is just totally off with kind of these two different themes of like, I'm making a bunch of puns, I'm a glutton myself, but then also now I'm noble. I have these these ideas of how to protect the people, and you're going to come in and squander it because you've never known famine. You don't know what you're dealing with. You have to protect people from this type of thing because they don't know how to protect themselves. And that was frustrating to me. Okay, so that's kind of where I'm at. I think that this game has incredible gameplay. The combat is so in depth. I love the world map. I love fixing up the towns, and I like the story. There's actually examples. Now, I haven't recorded them, unfortunately, but there's examples. The most recent quest I did where you have two sisters kind of going against each other. One's trying to bring her sister back to her family. There's some really funny dialogue that I really enjoyed. So I don't think that it's all bad or just kind of, maybe misplaced, but I do think there's just a clear example here of where whoever was doing the localization went a bit overboard with some of the writing. And it's clear from that Twitter thread that we read that was not the original intent of the writer for this game. And so I do think that we have to keep in mind that it's never going to be one for one, because some things won't make sense. Some things will be too basic, and that's where you get these games that are like, for example, AI translated, and you're like, that doesn't make sense, or like that's really lazy, or like bad writing, because it's just too basic of a English translation when it comes through. So there is examples of where these things have to be built up a little bit. They have to be fleshed out so that it's more intriguing and more interesting for us. The perfect example of that is the two versions of Final Fantasy Tactics, where I never had a problem with the original Final Fantasy Tactics, but when you played the War of the Lions, it was all the better for the improved localization. And I think that's like, there's really no way around that. Like, it just was a better game after the translations, although some people liked the classic spell names and all that kind of stuff. But that's kind of neither here nor there. What I'm talking about is that we need a happy medium when we have things like this. And when I review the game, that the localization is going to be in the con category. Like, that's going to be something that I'm going to have to talk about. But overall, it's still a great game. I'm really enjoying it, and I know a lot of you are too. So let me know where you land on this. This is not a typical video that I make, so let me know what you think, if I'm off on anything. And if we have different opinions, that's fine too. I know, there's people that say they enjoyed all the dialogue in the game, but to each their own, and you're allowed to have your own opinion. So just enjoy that, and be kind to each other, please, on the internet. Please be kind, okay? All right, awesome. We'll see you all soon in another video.